אדיר אויו ונורא בצר לי לך אקרא אשר לי ולא אירא.
Open up our Likutei Moharan to Torah 65, and Rebbe Nachman takes a passage from the book of Ruth. We all love the book of Ruth. That was one of our favorite lessons that we learned together. Rebbe Nachman says that he brings the passage of the book of Ruth. It's from the second chapter of Ruth, passage number 9. Vayomer Boaz el Ruth, and Boaz says to Ruth, Halo Shemati Biti, I heard my daughter. He says, my daughter, this is an endearing term. Ruth wasn't Boaz's daughter. She ended up being Boaz's wife. But he says, I hear my daughter, like CBT, you talk to someone endearingly, to a young woman, my daughter, my son. Don't go and glean in any other field. You know, when Ruth and Naomi came back from Moab, from Jordan, they came back to the land of Israel after there was a famine. Ruth and Naomi lost her husband, and Ruth lost her husband that was Naomi's son. And they were both very poor. They came back barefoot. They wearing almost burlap sacks, nothing more. And so, like the poor people, to exist, they had to glean in the field. And so Hashem turned out that Naomi sent Ruth to go out and glean, find something for us to eat. And Ruth went to glean in a field, and the field happened to be the field that belonged to Boaz. Boaz was Naomi's first cousin. And so in laws of inheritance, we'll see the laws of inheritance that Boaz was the next in line to inherit the lands of Naomi's husband and sons. And when you inherit the lands, you inherit, if there's a widow, you inherit the widow too. So ultimately, he does a liberate marriage to Ruth. And this is always beautifully, divinely engineered. V'gam tavoim, he said, don't go to any other field. Don't even look at somebody else's field. Okay, and you should look at my harvesters, and your eyes should follow them. In other words, follow my harvesters. Ruth was a beautiful young woman. Boaz says, I told my workers that not to touch you, that they're going to be very respectful. And if you're thirsty, and you go to the jugs, the vessels of the water the water they pull from the well, and you should drink from whatever the water my workers draw for themselves. This, of course, Ruth thanks Boaz. This for her was unbelievable, unbelievable loving kindness. That the boys, they got to draw for the well. They had to draw for the well for other poor people, and that could have much work done. But no, Boaz says she just like a member of the family. Okay, this is the part of Ruth. We're going to see what Rebbe Nachman does with this, where Rebbe Nachman takes with this. We're only going to come back to the interpretation of Ruth, and we think that this will probably take us at least 3 lessons to go through Torah 65. But very slowly. It's very morsel is sweet. It's honey, every single word. Okay, but we're going to get back to there. And after Rebbe Nachman elaborates, then he's going to go what we call in French literature, the déjouement. When Rebbe Nachman ties everything together at the end, we'll see this what the passage means here. Okay, so Boaz says to Ruth, he says, "Hear me well, my daughter," and we translate. Then we go now. So what's his message? Rebbe Nachman puts the book of Ruth aside, and now Rebbe Nachman says the first word, and it's a word we've elaborated several times. He says da, 2 words. Da means you should know. Well, why does it fit? Rebbe Nachman says, why doesn't he say da in front of every sentence? He says everything. This is something very special. He says at the beginning of a Torah, the da, he's about to tell a principle, that the principle is absolute inherent truth. Sometimes a principle will be argued back and forth, and sometimes interpreted one way, interpreted another way. And where do we see this da, the 2 letters, the daled and the ayin? If we look at a mezuzah, the first passage in a mezuzah is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The Sofer Stam, the ritual scribe, when he writes the mezuzah, and he writes the word Shema, the ayin, which is the 3rd letter of the word Shema, has to be written according to color 4 times bigger than the other letters. Then when he gets to the letter, the last letter, Hero Israel, Lord our God, Lord is one. Here is Shema. The last letter of Shema, Shin Mem Ayin, Ayin, it's written 4 times bigger. Shem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The last letter of Echad is Dalid, also described us 4 times bigger. Okay, so Ayin and Dalid together is Ad. That's eternal. Rebbe Nachman telling eternal truth. And when you turn it around, it's Da, you must know. When Rebbe Nachman uses this expression, he doesn't use it all the time, but you must know this is an eternal truth. What Rebbe Nachman is telling us, it's usually he tells us before he brings down some big secret from Shemayim. It's something that if a person pays attention, this is very apparent, but many people don't pay attention to what's going on in the world. So what does Rebbe Nachman tell us that's we adat? He says, Sheyesh Sadeh. You should know there's a field. What kind of field, Rabbeinu? Sham gdelim ilanot v'sabim yafim v'na'im ma'od. And there grows there exquisitely beautiful trees and plants. Talking about flowers. If you can imagine the most gorgeous greenhouse flower, the orchids, chrysanthemums. They look like weeds compared to the flowers Rebbe Nachman was talking about. Trees, beautiful, majestic trees. A wisteria at the time that it's flowering, a magnolia at the time it's flowering, but nothing. Much, much more beautiful, much, much more beautiful. And the level of beauty in this field and of all the plants that grow within it, impossible. It's indescribable. It defies description. Ashrei ayin ratazot. Happy is the eye that has ever seen this field. V'ilanot vasabim, and the trees and the plants. Hem prinat neshamot kedushot agdelin sham. Now Rebbe Nachman tells the secret. You know what or who the plants and the flowers in that garden are? These are the souls that are growing there. If a soul is lucky enough to be inside the garden, this is a soul. This is why we have to love each other and look for the good in each other, because if we don't look for the good in another person, we're blind. Rebbe Nachman is telling us that souls are exquisitely beautiful. You look at a person's exterior, you look at a person's broken nose, a person's pockmarked face, and something that looks physically like a blemish. Oh, you're far away. Far away, especially if you look at a person's skin color, or you look at something far away from the truth. That is so. That's an outer coating. That's like judging a food. You judge it by its wrapper. You can't judge it by that wrapper. Take the wrapper off. You don't need anything with its wrapper on. So when a person judges someone from the external aspect, it's far from the truth, because the truth is the internal aspect. Rebbe Nachman is teaching us inherent internal truths. The first thing he's teaching right now, that the beauty of an individual is in the soul. This is every single creation. The beauty is in the soul. We see this theme throughout the Gemara. Our sages, they don't say a bad thing about anything. They see a dead dog. And one of our sages was teaching his pupil, his principal, that everything is beautiful. And so they saw this dead dog, and it was already decaying, started to decay. And he asked his teacher, he says, Rebbe, what can you say about a dead dog? He says, look how white its teeth are. They say, always something nice, that when you're accustomed to looking good at other people, to seeing the good in other people, you're all the time happy. You don't find fault in people. Notice that people who find fault in other people, they're all the time miserable. They're all the time unhappy. And when you see people that find fault and they're very critical of other people, it's a miserable people, because the only way they can feel better is by stepping on someone else's. Don't you have anything else better to feel good about yourself? That you did something good, you gave a coin to charity, you helped a little old lady cross the street. Maybe there are 2 children at a crosswalk, and they say, can you help me cross the street? Yes. And you think that's a small deed? That's something magnificent. Something magnificent. They're not your children, but you show Hashem that you care about those 2 little children that they cross the street safely as if they were your own children. Okay? A person that focuses on the good, focuses on good thoughts and good speech and good deeds, this is a person who can see the beauty in others. So if a person can't see the beauty in others, Might as well, okay, check out and go watch a Netflix movie, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, because you're not going to understand that 65. To understand Torah 65, we have to put ourselves in a positive mentality, very positive mentality. So this is Rebbe Nachman says, happy is the eye that sees these plants. It's happy the eye that sees the good in other people. This is good. He now says something else. V'yesh kama v'chama neshamot arumot. And there are several unclothed souls. Kamlokan, more than several. There are many unclothed souls. Shehem na'im v'nadim michutz lagan. That wandering to and fro outside the garden. They're not inside the garden. They want to come in, but they're like in Dante and medieval literature. He says in limbo. There's a concept in Jewish esoteric Torah also of limbo. It's called kafakela. When a soul is kicked back and forth, the soul has no rest. And this is a terrible, terrible punishment. And a soul to do that had to be doing bad things, predominantly looking for the bad in the world, looking for the bad in other people. When a soul looks for the bad in other people, speaks bad about other people, does bad deeds, it's going to end up like kafakela. This is, again, Dante's limbo. If you learned that in medieval literature, or did in the Zohar, they're called kafakela, that the soul has no rest. And these are these souls. They're outside the garden. So what is Rebbe Nachman is going to teach us? That these souls need a correction. And they're looking inside. They can't see. They're looking inside, but they know that inside is paradise. Inside is Gan Eden. It's the Garden of Eden. Inside, it's as if a person, imagine that a person is really hungry and a person walking down the street and famished, needs something, and he smells charcoal grill steak restaurant, like kosher. He knows to go in there, but he doesn't have enough in his pocket for a bottle of mineral water. So what's he going to buy a steak for? He's longing for it. This even it quadruples his longing for that food. This is what happened with these souls. These souls know that there's this beautiful garden, and they know that they're homeless. And here, these gardens, these beautiful plants, how did plants? We're going to see that they're rooted, and they're getting their sustenance. They're rooted and they're watered. We're going to talk about what the roots are and what the water is, and where they're getting their sustenance from. And these other souls, it's like if you ever seen in a wheat field after the wheat has been harvested, and a wind comes along the prairie, a wind comes along the field, and the chaff is just flying in the air. These are what these souls look like. This is an exact example of these souls. And they're outside the garden, and they're going to and fro. Umamtinim umitzapim al tikun. And they're longing and looking forward for a soul correction. They know it's even worse. They know they're homeless, but they're not homeless. They have a home. They have a place inside the garden, but they're not there. They want to get back inside the garden, but you can't bet there's no admission ticket. There's only a special way to get back in the garden. And we'll see that's if the master gardener brings them back in the garden. He's got to do that. Now, sometimes even a great soul, a soul with a prodigious spiritual potential, can all of a sudden find itself outside the garden. Shabbat Luim Kamana Shamot. It's a big soul. That on this soul, sometimes we have, for example, a teacher and his pupils, a Rebbe and his Hasidim, parent and the children. In other words, when we have a situation of dependence, we're not talking about material dependence, we're talking about spiritual dependence, that to go higher, one person is dependent on another person. So sometimes we have a big soul where there are many souls that are dependent on that soul, and that soul itself, the influential soul, can find himself or herself outside the garden. That happens. But when an influential soul finds itself outside the garden, it is much harder for him to get back in. For just a regular soul needs to get back in the garden. That is a regular correction. But when a big garden, this is an example, we're learning this in Parshas Korach. Korach took himself by revolting against Moses, by saying bad things against Moses. Moses is God's chosen leader. Moses was not up to, there wasn't Trump and Biden in some kind of democratic election. They not democratic, but it wasn't an election. It wasn't Labor and the Tories in the UK. It was, we're talking about Hashem appointed Moses. And here, when you don't argue against Moses, you're arguing against Hashem. So Korach find himself got kicked way out of the garden. And Korach was on a very high level, but he fell under the influence of his wife, that his wife, she was a power hungry and status hungry and money hungry. And she pushed Korach. No, why? You've just every much right for the same family that Moses is, and there's no reason that Moses should be the president and Aaron should be the high priest, and you're just Korach was a very influential Levite. He was in that group of Levites that carried the holy utensils. They were under. They didn't have a wagon to carry the skins, the walls of the tabernacle and the boards of the tabernacle. They carried the Holy of Holies. They carried the utensils. They were very, very important. But like Korach, when he revolted against Moses, boy, he sure was outside the garden. Okay, so these are the naked souls that are outside the garden and trying to find their way back in. V'em kulam mevakshim umetzapim al balas hadeh. And who are all these souls that are outside the garden? And how do they want to get back inside? They're looking for the master gardener, what the owner of the field. The owner of the field, we'll call him the master gardener. Because the master gardener, just like a master gardener, horticulturist with a green thumb, he can look at a plant. And he understands his plants. Plants are it. If you deal with plants, it's so endearing to deal with plants, so gratifying. A plant can talk to you. A person understands plants. A plant changes color. So the plant's got a headache. What's a plant's got a headache? It needs potassium. Plant is a little bit weak. It needs a shot of nitrogen. And plant is tired. She needs a shot of water. And the horticulturist, he understands. It's just like in the same metaphor, Rebbe Nachman is telling us that the master gardener, he understands how to water each one of these souls. And this is an imagery, a metaphor that he uses later on in Torah 65, that he waters the trees, he waters the souls. This is exactly like owner of a greenhouse that raises these exquisite flowers, these exquisite plants. You go to a greenhouse to buy a nice plant for your living room or your bedroom, wherever you like. And this is the master gardener. So these souls are waiting for the master gardener because the master gardener knows what they need. The master gardener is the only one that can bring them back inside the garden. Okay. Now, sometimes their soul correction depends on another soul dying. Another soul dying. For instance, let's say a person's soul correction is to become the leader of Israel. Say Joshua's soul correction to become the leader of Israel. So Joshua can't get his soul correction until Moses dies, because Joshua can't become leader of Israel as long as Moses is living. So once Moses dies, Joshua assumes the leadership. Okay, he inherits leadership. So we see that one person's soul correction can be dependent on another person dying. Sometimes another person's soul correction can be dependent on a particular mitzvah. What did some of them did? Someone was, let's suppose one soul came back to the earth and did another go around. Why? Because he had an unpaid debt of $10,000. Okay. So now all of a sudden he comes back to this earth, and for him to get his soul correction, everything else is okay, but he's got to repay this debt. So he has a neighbor, and he might not particularly like this neighbor, but this neighbor becomes bankrupt, and he comes to the soul number one, and he says to soul number one, you know something, I need $10,000 to get back on my feet. And for normal business, he may not necessarily lend this person money. But here's the secret. This is soul correction. If soul number one knew that his soul correction depended on giving soul number two $10,000, he would do it right away. But this is part of the free choice. It's not that easy. We don't have the spiritual program, and we don't have all this information. We're not privy to all this information. But soul number one says, you know something? I've been learning the Chafetz Chaim's book, Avat Chesed, about the merit of loving kindness, and especially financial loving kindness. If I have the ability to help another person and help another person, what a beautiful thing it is. And this is the Rambam list that 8 levels of tzedakah. One of the highest level of tzedakah is not just give a person a free gift, but to give him a gift where he could get back in business, where he can stand on his own feet and make a living for himself. So a person says to himself, you know something, I'm going to do this mitzvah and I'm going to give it. So he does with a good heart. Boom, home run out of the ballpark. You scored. This is a goal in minute number 90. You won the game because this is his exact soul correction. So here in this one good deed, this particular soul gets back in the garden, and he's back in the garden. He finds all of a sudden his life becomes, he's still in this world. He still lives in London, or still lives in LA, or still lives in Joburg, or still lives in Miami, still lives in New York. But now his life is just different. He seems happier. He prays nicer. It's easier for him to talk to Hashem. He feels better on Shabbat. You know, why does he feel so much better? Because he's inside the garden. And there's something very important in Torah 65. We're not talking about the afterworld. We're not talking about this world. Torah 65 is a kaleidoscope that's talking about the world, this world, while we're alive and after we leave, because it's talking about the soul. And the soul defies time and space because the soul is a tiny part of Hashem. And just as Hashem is eternal, the soul is eternal. So if we can imagine the garden, the garden of the souls, which we're really talking about, the Garden of Eden. So a person said, we're talking about Garden of Eden, we're thinking about heaven, we're talking about after this world. No. A person that does Hashem's will, in his life, he has Gan Eden, Garden of Eden in this world. I saw this before. Hashem showed me this yesterday. Yesterday, when I spent the day on the Gaza border, not far from where I live. So that's spent the day on the Gaza border in Kibbutz Be'eri that was completely destroyed, and with a tank unit in the IDF on the Gaza border. But I went to Kibbutz Be'eri, which is not a religious kibbutz. And one of the kibbutz members, a very special woman, Racheli Fricker, she took initiative several years ago to build a synagogue. And maybe many of the kibbutzniks were against it. No, but she just lovingly, she didn't force it. Lovingly, she was the nurse of the kibbutz. And with no politics and no arguments, and just with love and a lot of unity, she built this synagogue. You see in the kibbutz, all the houses around the synagogue are completely burned. You'll see, you can see on laserbeams.com and winterbeams.com, we're doing a series of podcasts from the Gaza border. The first one up today. All the houses were burned. The synagogue was intact, nothing. And Racheli's house, the Hamas made her house the headquarters. In her house, there were 40 Hamas. And buried, there's 101 people killed there. 36 of the soldiers that came first response, they came first response with handguns. And Hamas had this arsenal of weapons and Iranian weapons and RPGs, and they were completely outnumbered and outarmed, and 36 soldiers died, and another 30 were taken hostage back into Gaza, of which 11 are still in Gaza, and hope that 4 are still alive, and also dedicate this to the hostages. They should come home soon, Bezrat Hashem. But went into the synagogue, and I'll never forget a smell that I smelled at Shmaya and Avtalion's gravesite. It's up north, right next to Miron, in an Arab village next to Miron. And Shmaya and Avtalion, they were the rabbis of Hillel the Elder, the Great. And went to their gravesite, and it was in the middle of an Arab village. An Arab village, you smell the smell of sheep and goats and burning charcoal. They make their living, but they're selling charcoal and said burning charcoal. Go into the gravesite, and it smelled like perfume. And I thought maybe there was a bottle of perfume in somewhere. Looked around, nothing. Go outside, smell the goats and the charcoal. Come back inside, and smells like Garden of Eden. And I'll never forget that smell. And I wasn't the only one. My wife was with me. We were going to the holy grave sites in the north yesterday, and going to the synagogue, right? Come out of the burning, again, the smell of charcoal. It still smells of charcoal, even though they've bulldozed most of the burnt houses, starting to rebuild them. Went inside the synagogue in Be'eri, it was the same exact smell. And I had two witnesses with me, the driver and the photographer, and Racheli, she's the fourth. There are four of us, and the smell. And I said to Racheli, I said, it smells like Gan Eden here. She says, it is Gan Eden. It is Gan Eden. She was 12 and a half hours in a bomb shelter. We'll tell this story in the next podcast. 12 and a half hours in a bomb shelter. The Hamas was there. They would lock it. It's a miracle after miracle after miracle. She says, I just checked out. She said Psalms for 12 and a half hours. She did not take her eyes out of Psalms. And there's not talking about a woman that was born religious or a woman with the trap. She looked like regular kibbutz lady, nurse in kibbutz. Very special. You could see that you could be in the middle of a war. And we go ahead, and in the middle of the interview, you go on laserbeams.com, hear the interview. You'll see in the middle of the interview, you'll hear jet planes flying over, and you hear the howitzers firing away the bombs. It sounds of war. So here, 15-minute walk to Gaza, a war going on, and you go in the synagogue, because the synagogue is a place of love and unity, and that's how it's built, and that's how it's maintained. There's soldiers there. There's Ashkenazim, there's Sephardim. The religious come, non-religious come. All the soldiers are welcome just to sit and have a cup of coffee and relax. They come, it's right up. They make army officers that can't get home. They make bar mitzvahs and brises and that. You could see a place by doing it. When a place, and you can make your home like that. When your home is a place of divine service, it's a place of chesed, it's a place of loving kindness, it's a place of prayer, it's a place of charity. And your home, people come in, and people come in, you can feel, it smells like the Garden of Eden. They feel tranquility. Sometimes you go into another person's home and you feel tension and you feel pressure. It doesn't smell good. Even people could be very rich and they could put all kinds of perfume and incense in the house, and still it smells terrible. Why? Then you're outside the garden. This is a place that's outside the garden. And when you go to a place where you feel so very good, you're inside the garden. So we see the garden is not only after 120 years. Cherish, brothers and sisters, it's right here. This is what Rebbe Nachman is telling us. It's right here. And people learn spirituality. I call it living room spirituality. We don't learn that. That's not the way we learn Rebbe Nachman. And not come to learn Rebbe Nachman and Likutei Moharan to make us spiritually intelligent and so we can show off our knowledge. No, because if we don't practice what Rebbe Nachman teaches, we haven't done anything. This isn't do this to just philosophize. It's not philosophizing. This is to make us better people, to bring us closer to Hashem, to make this world into the Garden of Eden. People are looking for happiness. Oh, if I take a Bermuda vacation, I'll be happy. If I do this, I'll be happy. If I get a new Lamborghini, I'll be happy. No, no, no. There is no such thing. No such thing. And this is not my words of King Solomon. King Solomon said, "Nefesh lo timaleh." He says in the soul cannot be satiated. No, be satiated not by material, not by material. The soul can be more and more satiated that the closer it becomes to Hashem. The closer it becomes to Hashem, the more it's illuminated, and the more it has the smell of Gan Eden. And that's why on Yom Kippur, when we can't eat, we carry these spices and pungent spices, and we smell spices all day long. It revives the soul. Even when you're not eating, you're not drinking, and it's a hot Yom Kippur is very hot. It's a hot day in Israel. And we do on Tisha B'Av also, you can't eat and drink. It's really one of the hottest days of the year. And on Tisha B'Av, you smell. This revives the soul because it imbibes the soul. It feeds the soul. So we see how all these souls are just seeking the master of the garden. Help me get back in here. Help me get back in here. But we saw in the meanwhile that a person's soul rectification can depend on one good deed. Or sometimes they don't wait for someone to die. Do a good deed. Take or maybe one good prayer. Or maybe one good prayer. Say one prayer properly where a person succeeds in connecting to Hashem. There's no such thing in connecting to Hashem and being outside the garden. Sometimes you see people that pray for things for years and they don't get it. They're not answered because they pray, maybe they complain, and they think they have a sense of entitlement. For example, a spoiled child is not a child that has too much love. No way. You can't give a child enough love. A spoiled child is a child with a sense of entitlement that doesn't have to say thank you. A sense of entitlement means I deserve something. We deserve nothing. We deserve nothing. Everything we have in life, every breath we take, every heartbeat, it's all a magnificent gift from Hashem. and we see this magnificent gift, and we have this trait of thanksgiving, of gratitude, gratitude helps us, our prayers to be sincere. Our prayers being sincere help us connect to Hashem, and this gets the soul back into the garden. Okay, so now let's try and find out who this master gardener is. So Rebbe Nachman tells us, someone that wants to take on the challenge. Maybe someone says, wait a second, I want to be the master gardener. I want to help all these souls get back in the garden. Okay, so who are you? Ish amid v'takif. Got to be a person that's very strong and very not going to make you veer from the way of truth. V'gibor chayil, and heroic, v'chacham, and wise, v'tzadik gadol mod, and a very tremendous tzaddik, a tremendously righteous person. Ki tzarich liot adam gadol muflag b'malamod. A person has to be on an extremely high spiritual level to be the master gardener. V'yesh echad she'enu yachol ligbo inyan kim imitato. There is a person, maybe he's capable of being a master gardener, maybe he's capable of helping other souls come inside, but he can't complete his own mission in life until he passes from the world, because his soul is limited by his body, and there's some they help other people after their deaths. They can't help people fully as long as their lives. Said yesh echad she'enu yachol ligbo inyan ki mitato v'afilu lezeh tzarich liot gadol mod. And even a person is not strong enough to be a master gardener within his lifetime, he still has to be, if he's helping other souls get back to the garden, he has to be on a very high level. Because Rabbi Nachman says there are many people, there are many great people, and there are different levels of greatness. And there are people that are great. Here you can see maybe a righteous person, a wonderful rabbi, a wonderful Rosh Hashiva, or maybe just a regular bottle washer, plumber, but who knows, a busboy, a waiter in the restaurant, somebody really righteous, but he can't finish his soul correction until he leaves the world. And I says one thing, rak, only, im yesh adam gadol muflag b'mala ma'od ma'od, if there is a person on an extremely high level, extremely high, Rebbe Nachman says, only a person on a very high, lofty level can finish his soul correction while he's still alive. But here's the big but. But he has tremendous tribulations in his life. Who is Rebbe Nachman talking about? Rebbe Nachman talking about is something in Breslov thought, which are called the 5 souls of Moses, the 5 souls, the aspect of the Moses. The first is Moses himself. What was Moses' nuance to the world? Moses brought us down the written Torah. The second was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, what was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? He brought us down the esoteric Torah. He wrote the Zohar. The third was the Baal Shem Tov. The third was the Arizal, the Holy Arizal. The Holy Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luri Ashkenazi, he brought us down the Torah of Kabbalah. He's the father of Kabbalah. The fourth is the Baal Shem Tov. What was the Baal Shem Tov's nuance? The Baal Shem Tov brought us down the Torah of Hasidus. And then the fifth is Rebbe Nachman, the great-grandson of Baal Shem Tov. And that's what Rebbe Nachman says in Yiddish. He says, my fire shall burn until the coming of Mashiach. What does Rebbe Nachman mean by that? That he is the soul. You imagine a relay race of these 5 souls. They pass the baton on to one another. And Rebbe Nachman means he's going to pass the baton on to Mashiach. That nobody's going to get this baton in the middle. And we could see, if you ask the Kabbalists, there are many tremendously great souls that could have been Mashiach. One, for example, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, could have been Mashiach, but it wasn't allowed. Why? Because the generation was not ready. The generations were not deserving. Okay, so even this is what Rebbe Nachman was talking about. You will see on the way great souls, Hafetz Chaim, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. You'll see great souls, but they leave this world. They bring tremendous souls closer. Look at how many souls the Hafetz Chaim with his teachings that he brought close to Hashem. He helped all of us, even if we say one bad word less. Okay, so nobody's got perfect speech, but for one bad word less, there's no such thing that nobody ever learned Chafetz Chaim. Anybody that learns that serves Hashem in the slightest. The Chafetz Chaim brought a whole generation. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, he brought tons of people close to Hashem. He brought American soldiers in Afghanistan, in Vietnam. He brought the people that were furthest away to the ends of the earth and brought them in. But and then just the Chafetz Chaim left the world. Rebbe Nachman left the world. This is what Rebbe Nachman is the Lubavitcher Rebbe left the world. That they won't be able to finish what they started. Well, won't be able to finish what they started. And Rebbe Nachman, he left the world also. He left the world also. But while he was here, there's a difference. The 5 souls that have the aspect of Moses, they are capable of not just helping a soul get closer, they are capable of helping the soul get its correction, where a soul can fully get inside the garden. Okay, but for these 5 souls, every single one of these souls was Moses. Moses went through unbelievable tribulations. You see the whole thing. You think this week's Parsha, this example of Moses' tribulations. That he took the people out of Egypt. He was the catalyst for splitting the Red Sea, Hashem's catalyst. People saw 10 plagues. People saw the 10 Red Sea split. They saw miracle after miracle after miracle. And now still revolt against Moses. And that everyone is so willing to listen to Korach's slander of Moses. What are you talking about? How come nobody argued with Korach? What are you talking about? Get out of here. Nobody argued with him. The whole community went behind Korach. Moses is standing. Here it is. He's done everything he's done. Moses, between leaving Egypt, he had to leave Egypt when he was 20 years old because he killed the Egyptian. He saw the Egyptian beating the Israelite slave. He spent 40 years in exile. He was in exile all through Africa. I know that when the Midrash tells us that Moses was king in Africa, until he finally reappears on the scene. He reappears in Midian. And Moses went tribulations and exile. Never had a quiet time. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Romans, they chased him. They chased after him, wanted to kill him. He was a fugitive in Israel. He and his son Rabbi Elazar had hide 13 years in a cave. And they didn't have any clothes. They were nude in the sand. They buried themselves up to the neck in sand so they could learn Torah. And they came out, and their whole skin was completely, there's deep rivulets, deep cuts in their skin. And it was the Zohar tells us that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's father-in-law, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, and he came and he saw Rabbi Shimon, and he saw how wounded he was from being 13 years in a cave, and he cried, and tears are salty. A tear fell on his wounds, and it hurt Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair says, "Oh, yeah, I've seen you like this." And he says, "You should be happy to see like this. This is my thing." Okay, so Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we could quickly. The Arizal, yeah, he died at a young age, 36. The Arizal had a rough life. The Baal Shem Tov, the whole Lithuanian world, even the greats of Israel, the Gaon of Vilna, they all argued against the Baal Shem Tov. Rebbe Nachman, forget about Rebbe Nachman's tribulations. Plus, Rebbe Nachman also died at a young age at 38, died of tuberculosis. Didn't have it easy. The souls that have a capability, these 5 souls could give a person a soul correction. They could look at a person's forehead and see the map of where that soul has been since Adam and Eve, because all the souls come from Adam and Eve. And this was their power, and they could see, you've got to do this. You came into the world because you owe this person this. You messed up on this mitzvah. You messed up on that mitzvah. This is what they could see. So it's not. Don't think people want to be head. Everybody wants to be president. Everybody wants to be prime minister. Everybody wants to be member of parliament. It's not so easy. But there's by us, it's rough. You don't get any reward. It's all responsibility. The reward all in the next world. So this is what Rabbi Nachman says, terrible, terrible tribulations. But this soul, his greatness surpasses everyone. Once again, there are many great souls, not denying many great, prodigiously great souls, but this soul is greater beyond our comprehension. Now we can understand why did so many people go against Moses? Why did so many people go against Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and go against the Arizal and go against the Baal Shem Tov and go against Rebbe Nachman? Because they didn't understand the greatness. They couldn't see. You stand at the bottom of a mountain. Somebody stands at the bottom of Mount Everest. You can't see what's on top of Mount Everest from the bottom. These people, they couldn't understand. They have no idea because these tzaddikim, you see their physical head. Maybe their physical head is 5'8", 5'9", 5'10". No, the physical head is light years high. They can't see. So people that don't have the spiritual eyes, once again, what we said in the beginning, these are the people that can't see the good in others. So these are the souls that are already on the outside. So these many souls that are on the outside, we can see that they're going to, when they get up in the next world, and it's either laugh or cry, and Hashem is going to show them that the exact soul that was capable of giving their soul correction, that they mortified that soul, they humiliated that soul, they tormented that soul. And this one we see, we learn in Amunah in King David, all the enemies in King David, Doeg and Achitopel, you guys, your soul correction would depend on King David because he was Mashiach. And rather than saying thank you and rather than cooperating, rather than respecting him, you did the exact opposite. You plotted against him. You wanted to kill him. You wanted to depose him. This is crazy things. We can see that's why the Zohar says that this world is Alma the Shikra. This world is the world of lies, because what's going on in spirituality is the exact opposite. You can see, this is what we call the rude awakening. This is the very rude awakening, the truth that these souls are going to find in the next world. So now Rabbi Nachman continues, and sheshezoiche letaken anshamot ulachnisam azay tov yafeh mod litpalel kazay atfilah al tikuna. Wow, what is the big advantage when your soul merits getting back inside the garden? Whether it is by the help of the master gardener, whether it is by your good deed, whether it is by another soul dying, and now you have to run with the baton. Say your teacher died. Now it's your plan to be to be the teacher. Okay, we have to be, but then not just wait till our teacher dies. Already teach our teachers' teachings to other people, and that's what we say. Everything is. I didn't invent what I teach. I get it from my teachers, and my greatest gratification is when my students, they have their students and they spread it. Okay, and sometimes I gave one of my colleagues. I gave one of my students a blessing. One of my students told me that he got invited to lecture, and he gave him a blessing and blessing outside of Israel. It's a sure, we should succeed. So the other rabbi says to me, "What are you saying? Why are you giving your student a blessing? Why don't you take it? Why don't you take it?" He says he's thinking about the royalty to get from the lecturing. I say, first of all, they think I don't charge money for lecturing. I don't charge. What do you live on? I said, Hashem gives me. I don't charge for Moharan. But he's thinking it's all the dollars and cents. I don't charge for it. And my students, I hope every one of my students down here, every one of my students has thousands of students. There's nothing, it'd be a greater pleasure. And you can see, I didn't say things in my name, Laser says this. No, you talk about either Rebbe Nachman says this, or the Melitzer Rebbe says this, or the Baal Shem Tov says this, talking the names of my Rebbes. And a pure student, we say the purity in a student doesn't say anything in his own name, because don't make nuance. So I made this big nuance. Okay, maybe learn a nuance, know how to teach it, how to bring it down to eye level. But you can't take credit for it. Because this is all the light you get from the teacher. The example, okay, so I get my produce, my meat for the Melitzer Rebbe, and I have to cook it properly so it tastes good. That's all. Okay, good cook. Okay, it's a spiritual cook, but you can't take credit for it. Take credit. You get the light from above, and my blessing for every one of you that you should have hundreds of students, thousands of students. I can tell you one thing, and this for sure: if you're spending this time. And now we're on a spiritual low, because before Mashiach comes, it's the darkest of the dark. It's the dark ages right now, because the truth is so far. We could see that people that are far away from truth, especially in Israel, look who runs the country. People that sanction national policies that go against the Torah. Oh, you have to be liberal, have to have gay parades. Well, we have to expose our kids and our grandchildren to this nonsense and to the transgender and all this. It's this filth, and it goes against Torah. And to all this thing, and they think, oh, you have to have freedom of religion, have to break Shabbat. Oh, you mean you have to go into the king's palace and spit on the floor in the king's palace? Okay, spit on the floor in the cow shed. When you're milking the cows in the king's palace, you don't do that. And they can see why Israel's having its problems. It's far from the truth because we're so close to Mashiach. And it's the same in the UK, and it's the same in America, and it's the same where it used to be when we were little kids. Okay, I grew up in America to my 21st birthday, and that's when I went to Israel. They grew up. Okay, we used to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Okay, one nation under God. Oh, that's against the law in America now. In America, you can't say one nation under God. Well, the founding fathers said it. George Washington said it. Thomas Jefferson said it. And John Adams said it. No, but you can't say it now. You can't say it now because it doesn't go with the Biden administration, and it doesn't go with the weirdos on Congress. Oh, one nation. Oh, but you can have all kinds of. Oh, but just transgender bathrooms, and all of a sudden find all kinds of things, abominations. This is just to show. We're not soapboxing, but to show how far we are away from truth. And the Master Gardener brings us to truth. Being in the garden is in truth, and truth smells like garden. That's why all the world has the spiritual stench to it, because when any place that's far from Hashem, you could go into a perfume shop, and it's got all this perfume. Have you ever smelled perfume that makes you nauseous? Go and have smells that makes you nauseous. When the perfume is not connected to holiness, it's nauseating. It's nauseating. And this is they could try and invent good smells, but you can't fake it. Not in spirituality. You can't fake happiness. Just you can't fake good. You can't fake. Oh, I'm happy. No, you're on drugs. You're not happy. Oh, I'm just no. You take it. No, that you're not happy. Happiness comes within. You can't fake it. You feel it's an inner feeling. It's an inner peace. It's the tranquility of the soul. Okay, so what's the first advantage Rebbe Nachman tells us of coming into the garden? Wow, all of a sudden you can pray. You feel like your lungs are breathing deeply. You feel that you can feel Hashem. You want to pray. Hashem, I want to praise your name. Hashem, I want to thank you. Hashem, I want to talk to you. And this prayer, it doesn't have to be prescribed prayer, but if you do prescribe prayer, you feel it. Some people within the community say, why do I need to make this blessing and that blessing? They're very lack on blessing. And they say blessings. I could teach a Brazilian parrot to make a blessing just like they do. Because they're far from outside the garden. They're far from Amunah, far from Hashem, and they're not happy. Look at a person. When you see a person, and a person is praying, and the person is not in this world. Not in this world. And there's something that Racheli Fricker told me yesterday in Be'eri. You can imagine a bigger Gehenna than your house is burning. Lucky their bonfire was the reinforced concrete and completely sealed. They had air conditioning, and lucky they didn't leave the air vents. Usually bomb shelters have air vents, but if the air vents were still there, the smoke would have killed them. The smoke would kill them. The fire in their house, it was 3,000 degrees. That's how hot it was. The things melted. Glass, you could see the glass is just, the glass panes were broken and bent. They're distorted. It was so hot there. Unbelievable. And the terrorists made the second floor of her house their headquarters because she lives in the highest, in a hill on the kibbutz. They could see everything in the kibbutz from within. And you're 12 and a half hours in a bomb shelter. Your house is burning. You hear people screaming, people getting massacred outside. You can hear all this inside. And there are 40 terrorists. You hear Arabic. They're talking and all they're saying how they need to kill more Jews. And they're killing and they're raping and they're pillaging and they're burning. And she says, I wasn't there. I took myself in Psalms, 12 and a half hours. There can be no bigger purgatory on earth than what went on in Be'eri on October 7th, 2023, on Shabbat, Simchat Torah. And here's a woman, and I said this way, Hashem showed me this. And after saying this, then I began to understand Torah 65. Before, I think an academic awareness of Torah 65. But this to bring it in the heart, what it means to be inside the garden. And here's a woman, she was a secular nurse. And she gradually got closer to Hashem on her own and started keeping Shabbat and built a synagogue and did all this good for all these people. And the synagogue is called Avat Shalom, the love of peace. And there's one law in that synagogue. I could just love everyone else. And people come to that synagogue from people with long black coats from Jerusalem to soldiers right off the border. It's just everyone's together. It's the one place of unity, and it smells like heaven. And this is Rachel herself, her own home. She made her home like that, and it smells like heaven. And this is how she survived this massacre. It's crazy. The massacre was so bad, she was rescued twice. The first soldiers that rescued her, some of them got killed. They got killed on the way taking her to a safe place, then she had to be rescued from a second place. But you could see that even if a person is in the middle of a war, in the middle of a Gehenna, you could take the soul, the body's in Gehenna, undoubtedly, nothing to argue about, but the soul can be in a place of peace because the soul is connected to Hashem that's inside the garden. So when the soul gets back in the garden, the first benefit of the soul is a love of prayer, a desire to pray. So when you don't feel like prayer, you feel lazy, get up in the morning, don't feel like praying. Okay, my brother, okay, my sister, outside the garden. Okay, that's it. Outside the garden, you don't feel like. And you feel, I just want to grab a book of Psalms. I just want to open up, I want to just talk to Hashem. Welcome to the garden. Welcome to the garden. Now you come inside the garden and everything is beautiful. And what's the difference between a person, again, that says Psalms like a Brazilian parrot and a person that says every word? And if every word, you appreciate this, if you don't join us on Wednesday night, join us Wednesday night in 1 hour and see how we say Psalms. I've learned Psalms, and every word, to learn the meaning of every word, the instrument, how it affects us. Rebbe Nachman continues, V'zeh ba'al hasadeh, and this is the master gardener, hu mashgiach u'mishtadel tamid lashkot et ilanot legadlam. This is the metaphor. He said, use further. The master gardener makes an attempt and endeavors all the time. This is a constant endeavor to water the trees and to raise them and to plants. Water does what's best for the trees and the plants. And he's watering them. He's nourishing them. What does it mean to water them? He's giving them the nourishment, what they need spiritually. This is what Rebbe Nachman is doing us right now. Cherished brothers and sisters. We're fortunate enough to be trees in the field. Here, right here, this is so beautiful. It puts tears in my eyes. I got to really control myself and not hurt just from the joy, the tears of joy. And it's Rebbe Nachman. This Rebbe Nachman is alive. And to give us this and to say, this, I'm watering you. This Rebbe Nachman is watering us right now. This is words, okay, coming down. It's just my mouth here is just the water jug that the master gardener is using, and out of this is coming the water that's from the master gardener. And here we are, we're all the flowers, and we're the trees that are fortunate enough to be right now inside the garden. Don't leave the garden. Okay, after tonight's lesson, don't say something bad about someone else, and don't take a scent that doesn't belong to you, and don't do something to hurt another person. Okay, and be your best to observe Hashem's law, whether it's the 613 or the 7 Noahide mitzvot, whichever affects you personally, okay, and stay inside the garden. And all the other corrections that the field needs, that the Rebbe Nachman, he also worked, and not just about the individual flowers and trees, but a master gardener knows how much distance to maintain between each plant and between each furrow. The different trees, different flowers, that some is enough for 3 feet between a furrow, some require 5 feet, 6 feet. If you're planting cucurbits like squash and watermelons, that they spread all over the place, you have to have 8 feet between each furrow. And this is what he says in the next word, to keep the proper spacing between the trees so that the trees don't step on each other. They don't trample each other. The master gardener, he says, this one, don't compete with that other tree. You've got your job. The tree's got his job. The master gardener keeps their place. And how does he keep their place? Give you a little secret ahead of time. What's their place? Their place, what's the place of a tree or a plant? The place of a tree or a plant is where their roots are. Where their roots are. Okay. So this is what is Rebbe Nachman for. What's all this metaphor? This is the root of our souls. This is where our souls are rooted in what's called the Elan, they call it in Kabbalah, the great tree, the great soul. This is in the upper worlds. And this is in Hashem. We all have. Hashem is our source of nourishment. Hashem is Mother Earth. Hashem is mother. Hashem, just like the mother nourishes the babies, Hashem nourishes our souls. Our souls are a tiny part of Hashem. We're connected to Hashem, and we're receiving our illumination and imbibing energy and our sustenance from the soul. Once again, the soul can't be sustained from physicality, only from spirituality. And if people would know that, they'd all yearn to get close to Hashem. But you can see the whole world is far away from Hashem. And that's why Merck and Pfizer and all the med companies, they're making so much money with all the meds that different makes and to bring people a ersatz happiness. This is great for big pharma, and it's great for the psychiatrist, that person for their retainer for the rest of their lives, because when they're on pills and they're not trying to find the correction of the soul, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't go to a psychiatrist. Some people need first aid, need to go to a psychiatrist in order to be able to hear this. They can't hear it. They need to be settled down. Some people need meds. They need to settle down. But as you're doing, I've done a lot of things in cooperation with psychiatrists, with patients, where while they are on the pills, to give them the spiritual nourishment. And we've had situations where people have been weaned off their meds little by little in cooperation with their doctor, that they learn and say 3 months, take 10% less dose. Another 3 months, another 10% less dose. And the psychiatrist agrees that they're okay, they're fine, that there's no deterioration, sometimes even better, and then take a little bit until they're finally weaned off. And we've had a success with this. So you have to know, you need both. But when a person only thinks he's totally dependent, you can't be totally dependent on a psychiatrist, you're in trouble. If a person is healthy, don't get in trouble. So seek Hashem now. But if a person is emotionally or spiritually unhealthy and needs that medical attention, needs that medical help, needs the first aid of the meds, that's fine. Okay, but just understand that is not the solution. That is not a correction of the soul. The meds cannot correct your soul. Now stop and think, wait a second. Where's the soul come from? The soul comes from the brain. The brain, that's where emotions come from. An emotional difficulty means it's a signal, so people understand it. It's a simple sign that the soul is suffering thirst or malnutrition. Now, we know when we're thirsty, you grab a bottle of water. Because what's the thirst mechanism? Thirst mechanism, the body saying, listen, boss, I'm about to be dehydrated. Grab a bottle of water, make a blessing. Okay, when the body's hungry or a person is faint, body says, hey, boss, my blood sugar level is low. I need something to eat right now. Come on. The body knows how to demand what it wants. The soul makes a little demand. The soul is like a little whisper. But when the soul doesn't get what it wants, soul raises its voice. It's like a beloved wife. First she says, honey, can you take the trash out, take the garbage out? No, he's got his foot on the table with his potato chips and his Coca-Cola. Oh, after the ball game. No, he says, it doesn't smell. I'm cooking for Shabbat and got all these fish bones and chicken bones. Take it out. Oh, no, later. And then she raised the third time she says, she's not going to be honey, David, loving wife. She's going to be, get off your derriere and come into the kitchen and get this out of here. And the fourth time, he's going to get the trash dumped in his lap. Okay, so it's the same thing. The soul, first time, I need something. I need a connection to Hashem. No, what did Hashem? Don't tell me what to do. No, I need something. And then, just get it. Okay, you don't give me what I want. So now you're going to be laughing. It's going to be depression and stress and anxiety. It's not because of work. It's not because of outside things. It's because of the soul. Because once again, what bigger anxiety is having 40 Nukba terrorists dancing on your roof, shooting guns, killing people all around? But a person, I saw this with my own eyes. and witnesses to it, and other survivors also. Other survivors, because one woman, she, one time a Chabad guy left a book of Zohar in her house. He gave her a book of Zohar. Was it a Chabad guy? And she made a country give a book of Zohar. She doesn't know Aramaic. She doesn't know how to learn the Zohar. Okay, she grabbed the Zohar and she locked herself in the closet. The closet's not a bomb shelter. They ransacked the household, the whole house. They hacked it. They didn't open that closet. She spent 12 hours in the closet until they took her out, and she's held on to the Zohar, She clung to Hashem. She clung to Hashem in whatever way she could. So when we cling to Hashem, it doesn't matter our level, whatever way you can. It's being in the garden. And being in the garden, who's this soul? Who is this? The tree that our root, the tree of life, rooted in the tree of life. And so Rebbe Nachman, the master gardener, places each soul where it is according to the soul's root in the field. And that's the field. It's another imagery, right at Kabbalah. We say on Shabbat, on Friday night, it's the meal Chakal Tapuhin Kadishin. It is the field of the fragrant apples, the holy fragrant apples. Who are the holy fragrant apples? That's Malchut. That's the Shechina. That's Emunah. That's how it is. And this again, we're talking about. So all this imagery, it comes back. You have to understand godliness. It defies our third principle of Emunah. It defies any physical characteristics. Everything defies any physical characteristics. But that's why we use these metaphors, because we're humans and to make us understand. Okay, so we are going to hold up right here. And that's, I don't want to take it any faster than that. We finished this first completion, the first part of Torah 65. Next week, God willing, we'll continue on with Torah 65.